So we will go from this to Pascal and the legislation aspect of this. And of course, for us all, the legislation is sort of the floor we're standing on when everyone is supposed to do at least the same in those respects. So tell us how the floor is moving, Pascal.
Yes, thanks, Joel. Let's say there's lots of different materials to be used for that floor, and it's all happening at the same time. So you really need people who know how to lay down those materials together. But I'm happy to meet you all. Thanks, Joel, for the opportunity. Just a quick notes on who we are at Ohana Public Affairs. We are a small boutique organization. You basically see everybody on the slides, plus someone is missing, but we are small but strong and committed. And we also have a blog where you can actually, I think it's, for what I heard, it's a good source of information to understand what is happening in Brussels, because we actually post quite often, twice a month, some articles there. So you can also refer back to the blog if you need any further information. So yeah, that's it. And I'm gonna go through for the next 25 minutes, and Joel, feel free to stop me if you think I'm speaking too much, on why and what is that floor that we're discussing. So that sustainability is really now regulated within the full EU. So it's not only on textile legislation or ICT, electronic and electrical equipment, as we've seen in the past, but it's really having the laws on sustainability action is kind of a new license to operate. It will impact the full value chain, even though as brands and retailers, you're the first or official actors in the scope of the legislation, but basically also the other service providers, recyclers, but also producers will have to comply with those laws from a ripple or cascading down effect. Important to note that it's here to stay. It's just not, yes, it's all in one go and it's overwhelming, but the rules will be reviewed regularly. So you will have to really have that process in place and identifying the key legislation for you as a retailer. And we do expect it that other regions of the world will follow that trend. So it's not going to be isolated. Coming back to the point of, communication to consumers, that was kind of the angle we wanted to take for today. Is also beyond that is, yes, you will need data to communicate, but actually all the pieces of legislation will ask you to have data to know what is happening in your value chain, in your product, in the products that you are selling, or if you make any claim, that you need to have that data to substantiate your claim and to be compliant. So kind of in summary, what you need to keep in mind is that if you do not have the data, you actually don't have access to the EU market or to, for example, Sweden. And that would mean, and I know one of you is more an IT person, that means also your IT system needs to talk to each other with your suppliers, or that you need to create a structure and architecture of your system that actually fits with the compliance requirement. So here's the overview of all those materials we were talking about when it comes to laying down the floor and those minimum requirements. Important to note is that legislation basically defines those minimum requirements that as an industry, you will have to fulfill. So you can go beyond that. You can do more if you want to, but everybody will have to comply with that. And member states will check if you do comply. Here, I put it into 3 buckets, and we're not going to super details because of the time that we have together today. So I want to make sure Katie has the time to explain her great project. But it's important for you to keep in mind that you have legislation at company level, so defining how you need to define your risk within your value chain and how to mitigate them and address them, and how to report. So that's like a big bucket for company level. The most important one, and that's where we're going to spend a bit more time, is around product and above all eco-design. As a retailer, you will have to ensure that the products that the brands are selling you and that you're selling to your consumer will have to comply with those requirements, but we'll come back to that. And then there are others like, chemicals, packaging, forced labor is a bit similar to due diligence. Deforestation too, there is like a due diligence approach, is more on leather for this one. And then the whole waste management. And the big one, I think, for retailers, it's all about communication. And that's where we're going to spend a bit more time today. Important to note why there are different colors here is the green ones, the green pieces of legislation, are the ones that are finalized and actually being published, that you can have access to the final legislation already. The one in blue are the ones that we expect to be finalized before now and April, meaning that we are still in the process in Brussels of finalizing the legislation, but you should have the official text by spring. And the red ones are the ones where it will take a bit more time, and we should have them by the end of 2024, early 2025. When we were discussing with Yoel how to prepare today, we thought it would be good to really highlight those key pieces of legislation that are important from a retailer perspective. So those that will have direct impact because you need to ensure that you do comply, depending on your size, are due diligence and the reporting directive. Because if you have a company or if you're a member of a company that is beyond 250 employees, you have to comply with those two pieces. The other big one, the big chunk, is communication. So empowering consumer directive with the unfair commercial practices piece of legislation, and green claims, which refer to the product environmental footprint, like an LCA methodology. I will be going into more details into that. And the reason why I'm putting here the Waste Framework Directive, it's the piece of legislation that oblige member states to create sorting and collection system, and it's being by 2025. And now they're reviewing it to add additional, to refer to additional requirements. And when this piece of will be in place, should you want to have in your own retail stores or also online, there might be also some impacts on you, mainly in the brick and mortar and like the really physical store. If you want to collect garments, for example, mainly for textile, you will have to be part of the organization, the product responsibility organization that will be set up at national level. I'm happy to go more into details during the Q&A, but that's something to keep in mind. If you want to have sorting and collection from textile, there might be additional rules that you will need to take into account after 2025, 2026. And the right to repair here, I put it there, is not for now, it's not the high level for you, but there are some rules that are being laid down. And in like few years, I would say 2028, 2029, it will apply to hard goods, so like skis and others. So that's why I wanted to put it there, in case you have repair services in your shops. And all the others are the ones where when you will sell the products from other brands, or if you have your own brands, you need to ensure that those brands comply with those pieces of legislation. And the key one where everybody is actually a bit stressed out is the eco-design, also because of the digital product passport, because you will have to gather data and being able to provide this information to your consumer. So I will focus on today on eco-design and substantiating green claims and empowering consumer, and touch them really at high level, but it gives you an idea, flavor of what's coming up. Here's the high level timeline, though, that is important, is that we do expect the final legislation as set in 2024, 2025. So that means more or less 3 or 4 years later, and starting also in 2025, you will have to be to implement the legislation, but mainly be compliant with the legislation. So that was like high level introduction on where we are, what is the floor that Johan was referring to. But I will deep dive, as said, into first eco-design and digital product passport, and then green claims and empowering consumer. So eco-design, so-called ESPR, in case you haven't heard about this before. It has five important objectives. So define performance requirements at environmental level. So I will come back to that. The first important to note from an outdoor perspective is that textile is a priority product, whereas hard goods are not yet a priority product. So that means you will have more time to, the requirements for hard goods are not yet defined, whereas from textile, meaning garment and footwear, are in the pipeline. There will be also, once you have those performance requirements defined, at the same time, they will define required information. So for example, for the jacket I have here, or the hoodies some of you are wearing today, then it would be like, for example, recycled content, durability requirements, recyclability, and then linked to those requirements, we'll have to provide the information, specific information. Each of the products that fall in the ESPR will have to comply with digital product passport, meaning that all actors along the value chain will have to provide inputs into that IT system, so that governments, but also business-to-business companies, so for example, recyclers and consumer, have access to need-to-know basis. Then you will have to carry out a conformity assessment. I will not go into details on this one. And the last point is around unsold goods. So according to the law, any organization or brands will have to disclose, report on the number of unsold goods. And it will be also banned to destroy the unsold goods, and with recycling potentially be seen as destruction. So quickly, what actually performance requirements means. The ESPR will define the minimum requirements here. So really, like, what as an industry we need to comply to be able to put the product on the market from an environmental perspective. If you want to go beyond, it's fine. And you will have other legislation, for example, green claims, also labels, so the EU eco label, the one with the little flowers, that will reward best performing products. But really keep in mind that eco-design requirements is the baseline if you want to sell your products. And that minimum requirements, we hope actually to really change a bit the industry. As mentioned, those requirements evolve around durability, recyclability, recycled contents, substances of concerns, meaning chemicals that hamper recyclability, microplastics, but also carbon and environmental footprint. The law define high level what, like those categories, but for each product, for each industry, so example, textile, but in the later on, we could think of skis or phones, they already exist. they will define like exactly what durability means for textile, what durability means for skis, what durability means for phones. So it's just a general blanket, and then for each sector, we'll go specifically into the requirements through what we call delegated act, which is a secondary level of legislation. Then linked to that, as mentioned, there will be some information requirements. So what kind of information you have to provide to the consumer. So information around the substances of concern, product performance, about the end of life of the product, and also information on the supply chain. All of that would be captured in the digital product passport and disclosed through a label. So we've been talking about the digital product passport. So what it is, it's actually decentralized system. So you will have two workflows from an architecture, what it means, like IT system, and under which vehicle you can provide the information to your consumer and to governments, but also what kind of data we collect. So the digital product passport, important to keep in mind, is not only for the end users, but it's really for also gathering information to prove that your product comply with the requirements. So it will be like a big database where the governments can go and have a look and capture and get the data they need, but also the recyclers to understand how they need to take care of the product at the end of life, and consumer when at the moment they purchase the product, they want to have more information, then they can go on that tool. It will be digitalized, so you don't have to have the full information through, for example, a QR code or FID. What is the timeline? Here's the timeline for textile. So we should have the final legislation by the end of this year, early 2024, most probably by April, big max. So you will get that overall framework of what it is. And then in early 2024, we have what they call the work plan. So understanding which product will be top priority for the European Commission to define those individual requirements. So product performance, information, etc. Here, we know already that garment and footwear are top priorities, whereas hard goods, it's not very clear when they will be on the list. So this work plan will give you that understanding by when ESPR will apply to hard goods. In parallel, what the Commission is doing is checking and defining what are the digital product passports requirements in more details, and we'll go a bit into that. And also for textile, exactly what we need to fit in. So that gives you an overall look that all of those specifics will take about 2 years. So we should have all the requirements for textile by end of 2027, if everything goes smoothly, and then implement those requirements by 2026, 2027. So that's a bit how it will look like, how it works. Important to note that for garments and for clothes and footwear, all those high performance products might probably not be included in the first round, but would be in the second round. So even for like top quality gear for skiing and others, might actually you will have to comply with ESPR even further than down the road than 2027. So important to keep that in mind too. This information, I think it's more for the background. We will discuss in the coming months what garments means, what kind of scope, so what I was saying with the technical parts, but also the product aspect. So what would be the requirements, and also review the EU Ecolabel and Green Public Procurement requirements. And that would be done along 2024. When it comes to digital product passport, I skipped the IT part, but I'm happy to put them in annex. But what it's important for you to understand is the data to capture and what will be defined under the project. So if we go top to bottom, they will define a unique identifier per product, economic operator, and facility, so that we can trace really the product to the right people, which is not really existing in our industry at the moment. And it will also allow custom authorities to do the real check from there. And then per big sections, we will define like what are the data that should be accessible to consumer and users such as recyclers and authorities. So that will apply to circularity, other sustainability data, other product related data, and compliance document. So you will have like a big Excel file, and each third party will be able to access whatever they need through that Excel file, like a big filter. Here are the data that we are looking into at the moment as a first set of requirements to be added into the digital product passport. So it complements what I was just saying before. It's product information, company information, or the technical specification, material and composition, because it will have some impact also on durability and recyclability. Same as for the product design. Repair and reuse, and also any certification that could be useful, and labeling too. So all of that will be input to the DPP. Further information, if you want, I can also put that in the annexes. There is a website called Sympatex. I will write it down in the chat, where you have more information on DPP, also from an IT perspective. They are discussing all that. And to be honest, I'm not an IT expert, so maybe it's better I provide you with the slides, and if you need to get into more details, you can go there. So that was a bit of a quick overview on Ecodesign and DPP for today. Now we'll move towards more the marketing and communication towards consumers, so B2C. That has been already legislated by the EU. So when we look at products, we have two sets of pieces of legislation: the safety net with the Empowering Consumer Directive. This directive reviews two pieces of legislation that already exist: the Consumer Rights Directive and the Unfair Commercial Practices Directive. So those two, you should actually already be compliant. Important to note that even if you're a small company, you will have to comply with this one. And I will go into more details on where we stand in the Unfair Commercial Practices Directive. So that I would say if you want to review, I highly recommend you to review the way you communicate towards your consumer. This is the first step to take. Look at the Unfair Commercial Practices Directive and then already work on that, and you will see the others will follow. When it comes to textile, or like actually all legislation, you will have, as explained, the Ecodesign and the ASPR information requirements that will be specific to all, like each product category. And then you will have the Green Claim Directive, and it's really on environmental aspects of your products, but also company and services. And then we are reviewing in Brussels the textile labeling regulations, like all those long tags in your clothes that are itchy. That's basically what it is. And so important to one thing you need to keep in mind, and I said it before, is when it comes to marketing and communication on products and also on company level, if you want to communicate to your consumer about what you're doing, you need to have the data. You need to substantiate your claims. If you don't have the information to prove that your claim is right, don't make any claims. It's as strongly as this is, I would not advise you to communicate if you don't have information. You will lose credibility. It could also could be damaging to your reputation as an organization. So anything that you can bring back home from today is like data before communicating. Otherwise, you will be in trouble. As said, we will now go into more details in Unfair Commercial Practices Directive and green claims. So instead of saying Unfair Commercial Practices Directive all the time, I would say UCPD is way quicker. Here is how those two are linked. The UCPD is like the bigger framework, and green claims is looking at part of it, or part of the claims that the UCPD is regulating. So it's a two-step approach. But first, the UCPD. Here, what I'm explaining right now is what we will have as a final law, because all the institutions agreed on what I'm going to explain. So important to keep that in mind. It will tackle all B2C communication for product and businesses. So if as a retailer you communicate about your organization, you need to comply with this piece of legislation. It's not only environmental information, it's also social information. So living wages, working conditions in the production, in the supply chain, all of that, you will have to comply with the requirements set up in this legislation. It encompasses not only written and label communication, but also like movies and audio claims. And here's the link to the final agreement. So that would be the final law. Could be important, interesting for your legal people. I'm not going to go into all the details of all those commercial practices that are defined as unfair. What is important to keep in mind is that if you have a label, you need to make sure that it's based on a certification scheme or established by public authorities. You cannot just create your label like this as a retailer. You really need to have that background, that foundation before putting the label out there. Generic environmental claims can only be such as eco-friendly, can only be made if you have explanation, so supporting information on the same medium as your claim. So for example, I'm saying for this jacket that is environmental friendly because in my mind, I know it's, I don't know, 30% recycled content. Then if I make that claim on the label, the explanation, so the percentage of recycled content needs to be right under the claim, or if it's on the packaging, the same, or in the store, it will be the same. The consumer need to see that claim and the explanation at the same time. That's really important. Another one that I want to highlight here is the one on greenhouse emissions offsetting, and then I will move forward. But this is really important. If you're making claims such as carbon neutral, carbon positive, but it's mainly based on offsetting, it's forbidden from now on. So you really need to make sure that what you're claiming on climate is actually based on actions that you're taking. And I think, yeah, I will, anyway, you will have all those points, but I would say those are the big ones that I wanted to highlight today. So, as explained, unfair commercial practices is the big framework, whereas the green claims is also on B2C, but on environmental explicit claims. So that means that you really want to be super specific on the product, on what the company can deliver. So it's either at performance level, aspects, or impact. And at the moment, in the text that has been was drafted, it's only encompass text and label as claims. The law here defines a process on how you can communicate your claims. So the first step is that, let's say, Ohana wants to make a claim about that jacket. We like, it's super cool. It's like has less chemicals. It's better. It's from a recyclability. It's better for this and this reason. We want to make a big splash, and when we sell it, before even communicating, we need to when we develop the product, we need to gather the data to substantiate that claim. It needs to be science-based, and it needs to actually have an impact from a life cycle perspective. So if it's, for example, just the golden, I don't know if you see it, but there are like kind of golden frame here. If it's only that is actually like good for the environment, then it's not even allowed to just do a big splash about just this, because it's really teeny tiny compared to the life cycle of the product. So you want to make a claim, get the data. It's as it is, as easy as it is on paper, not in reality, I know. Once you have your claim, you have the data, you're pretty sure that it's strong and it's science-based. You go to a verifier that would be appointed by a member state. And that verifier will verify your claim before it's communicated to the outside world. So that verifier will check the claim, the information that you're providing as evidence, and how you will communicate. Only when it's done, you will be able to communicate the claim. So never skip that step. For labels, they will check the governance of the label and the schemes. Once you have your claim verified and it's a green light, you will get a certification of conformity. And you will be able to communicate the claim with the substantiation information and the certification of conformity. So meaning that this jacket, as Ohana, we will be able to say, it's super cool, it's got this features, blah, blah, blah. And then the consumer will have either the ability to scan the QR code and get into a website with all the information, that all the substantiation information will have to be provided, plus the certification of conformity. So again, you will have to think of IT systems or website structure so that your consumer is getting to a second level of information, not just on the product page where you get like the claim, but also all the explanation on the standards used, on the results of the test, etc. So it's a massive effort also of thinking on how to present this information to the consumer. I just wanted to highlight here, I know it's already, we still need to go through other information, but when it comes to labeling requirements, you need to make sure that they really comply with the law, either because you're using, for example, the Nordics ones or GOTS or textile exchange from textile perspective. And they will have to review the governance, so to ensure that it's independent and transparent according to criteria as defined, and that also they are based on scientific data. They will also have to prove that they add value. That's really important. And as mentioned before, it will be more complicated or impossible for companies or retailers to create their own label. Otherwise, you will have to really to prove that you add value to the information that is already existing. The reason for that is that they don't want a multiplication of label and where consumer are a bit lost. So important to note also that aggregated scores will not be allowed unless they're based on EU methodology. So at the moment, there are some questions around the French eco score in case, I don't know if you're making business in France, but it's one of the questions that we are having often. So that was it, like in really a short, high-level approach. I wanted to make sure we had time for some questions and that also you had time for discussion and for Katie presentation.